Welcome to the Book Review Podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into a really fascinating book, The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga.
It really is quite something.
Yeah. And it's presented as this dialogue, almost like you're listening in on a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Between a philosopher who's deep into Adlerian psychology and this young man who's kind of wrestling with life's big questions.
Exactly. It's this blend, philosophy, practical psychology.
Tackle some big themes too. Trauma, relationships, the whole desire for recognition thing.
And ultimately how you get to real happiness.
Yeah.
So get ready for a bit of a perspective shift, I think.
Definitely. What strikes you immediately is that structure, isn't it? It feels like those old Socratic dialogues.
It does. You're pulled right into this intellectual back and forth.
And the young man starts off pretty firm, right? People can't change, life's hard.
And the philosopher just jumps right in and challenges that.
Using Adlerian psychology, which, maybe isn't as famous as Freud or Jung these days.
But it offers a really different viewpoint on us.
Yeah, a very distinct lens.
Okay, so let's maybe unpack this Adlerian psychology a little bit. The book mentions the philosopher values Greek thought, but Alfred Adler's ideas from the early 20th century.
That's the core framework here.
Right. And what's interesting is figures like Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, people who really shaped modern self-help.
They were influenced by Adler significantly.
So these ideas, even if we don't always hear Adler's name attached, they've probably, touched our thinking already.
That's a great point. The book even says Adler kind of predicted that his name might fade, but the ideas would become like common knowledge.
Common wisdom, yeah.
So this deep dive isn't just about this book. It's also about encountering a perspective that's been sort of subtly shaping things for a while.
Right. And that first clash, that initial argument in the dialogue, it's all about whether fundamental change is actually possible.
Mm-hmm. The young man brings up his friend, the reclusive one.
As his prime example, yeah. Saying some people are just stuck, maybe because of past trauma, past hurts.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the philosopher offers a completely different take. Adlerian psychology, he says, doesn't really dwell on past causes. It focuses on present goals.
Okay, hold on. So, not why things are the way they are because of the past.
Exactly. That's etiological thinking looking backward for causes. Adlerian psychology, or at least as it's presented here, is teleological.
Teleological, meaning?
Meaning our actions are driven by the goals we have right now. So for that reclusive friend, the philosopher suggests maybe he isn't withdrawing because of trauma, but because he currently has a goal not to go out.
And the anxiety serves that goal.
In a way, yeah. The anxiety becomes the justification, the tool to achieve the goal of staying home.
Wow. Okay, if you're like the young man in the book, that might feel a bit jarring.
He finds it depressing, actually.
I can see why. The idea that his friend might be sort of choosing the isolation? Yeah. That's tough.
It is. But the philosopher pushes it, suggesting maybe the friend's behavior is aimed at getting his parents' attention, or maybe just avoiding what he sees as the hassle or risk of dealing with the outside world.
It's fascinating how Adlerian psychology suggests even things that seem negative, like anxiety or withdrawal, can serve a purpose, usually in our relationships.
Right. Anger is another example they use, not just some random emotion that takes over.
A tool.
Yeah, potentially a tool you use to achieve a goal, like, winning an argument or making someone submit. This whole teleological view really makes you rethink your own emotions and what's driving you.
So what does this mean for trauma then? Because we hear so much about trauma shaping us.
Well, the philosopher directly challenges that idea, the idea that trauma is the direct cause of your present unhappiness.
Challenges it how?
He argues that focusing only on the past, on etiology, creates this sense of determinism, like you're fixed by what happened.
Leaves you feeling powerless, basically.
Precisely. The book suggests, look, those past experiences happen, they're facts, but the meaning you give them, the interpretation.
That's a choice you make now, in the present.
Exactly. Adlerian psychology really emphasizes your power right now to decide on your lifestyle.
And lifestyle here doesn't mean like your house or car.
No. In Adlerian terms, it's your fundamental way of seeing the world and interacting with it, your basic orientation.
Okay, so you can choose that lifestyle now, regardless of the past. Unhappiness, then, isn't something done to you.
Yeah, it's something you maybe unconsciously choose for yourself.
That's right. It's empowering, but I can see how it could feel uncomfortable too.
Definitely. It pushes back hard against seeing yourself purely as a victim of your history.
It suggests that even if you feel stuck, you're actively somehow choosing that state, maybe without realizing it.
And this links back to that lifestyle concept. You don't choose your circumstances, your birth, whatever, but you do choose how you interpret them and how you respond. You choose the lifestyle you adopt going forward.
It's not about blame then.
Not at all. It's about highlighting your agency, your potential for change now.
Okay. Then the dialogue shifts, and this feels like a really big statement.
Yeah.
All problems are ultimately interpersonal relationship problems.
It's a huge claim, yeah. But central to the book's argument.
How does that work?
Well, take feelings of inferiority. The book argues these aren't objective facts about you.
They're subjective.
Entirely subjective interpretations that only happen when you compare yourself to others in a social context.
So, like, being short isn't inherently an inferiority.
Exactly. The philosopher points out if you were totally alone on an island, the concept of short wouldn't even exist. It only becomes an inferiority when you assign that meaning through comparing yourself to other people.
So the feeling itself isn't the issue, but the subjective feeling about it compared to others.
Right. And that feeling, the book says, can sometimes be used as an excuse. That leads to what Adler called the inferiority complex.
Which is when you basically give up trying. Use the feeling as a reason not to strive.
Precisely. And interestingly, the book connects that to the opposite, the superiority complex.
People who brag constantly or act superior.
Often, yeah. It suggests they're actually masking deep feelings of inferiority.
So life isn't a competition? We're not supposed to be trying to beat others?
Not according to Adlerian thought. The pursuit of superiority isn't about being better than others. It's about your own personal growth, striving forward on your own path.
On a level playing field.
Exactly, where everyone is equal as humans, even though we're all different.
That idea of equality, despite differences, seems really important. Treating everyone with sincerity, respect.
The young man talks about his own competitive feelings towards his older brother, fueled by how their parents compared them.
And that was a source of his inferiority feelings.
Right. But the philosopher gently guides him and us back to teleology again.
So instead of saying my parents comparing us caused my inferiority,
it's more like, what's my goal now? How might these feelings be serving a purpose for me today? It doesn't dismiss the past pain, but it shifts the focus to your power now.
Okay. The book also touches on things like power struggles in relationships and revenge.
Yeah, it argues anger is often that tool we talked about, used to try and win these struggles.
And if it gets to the point of seeking revenge,
then finding a positive way forward is incredibly difficult. The key takeaway, according to the philosopher, is to consciously step down from the conflict.
Don't react when someone tries to provoke you.
Basically, yes. Don't get drawn into their power game. The book makes a really sharp point. The moment you become convinced I am right in a fight,
you're already in a power struggle.
Exactly. The focus shifts from whatever the issue was to just winning.
So admitting you might be wrong, or at least stepping back, isn't weakness.
No, it's a way to disengage from the power struggle, to actually create space for maybe finding a real resolution.
That seems connected to this idea of life tasks they talk about.
It is. The inevitable challenges life throws at us: work, friendship, love.
And the book suggests we sometimes avoid these tasks. Why?
Often because we lack the courage to face potential hurt in relationships, the fear of rejection, of being disliked.
So you start seeing others as enemies almost, adversaries.
Potentially, yeah, instead of comrades or allies. And that fear hinders engaging properly with those life tasks. Which brings us to a really crucial concept.
Separation of tasks.
Bingo! Separation of tasks.
Okay, this sounds really practical, like something you could actually use day to day. What is it?
It's about figuring out whose responsibility, whose task something really is. The classic example they use is a child studying.
Whose task is that?
Fundamentally, it's the child's task, not the parent's. The parent can offer support, encouragement, sure.
But they can't do the studying for the child. Or force them, really.
Exactly. And when you interfere in someone else's task, like a parent constantly nagging about homework, it usually causes conflict. And it stops the other person, the child in this case, from learning to manage their own responsibilities.
So when people say, I'm doing this for your own good,
they might actually be fulfilling their own needs, like needing to feel in control or wanting things to look a certain way.
And the person on the receiving end usually senses that, right? Which leads to resentment.
Often, yes. The book argues that even in our closest relationships, family, partners respecting this separation is key. You can choose to believe in your partner, for instance. That's your task.
But how they respond to that trust?
That's their task. Trying to control or manipulate their response crosses that boundary. It can become unhealthy, obsessive even. Love, in this view, requires respecting the other person's autonomy.
Does this apply at work, too? Like, with a difficult boss?
Definitely.
Yeah.
If your boss gets angry unreasonably, that anger, managing it, that's their task.
Not mine to absorb or fix.
Right. Your task is to do your job well, honestly, without getting dragged into their drama or letting their issues dictate your actions.
Wow. So separation of tasks is presented as this key to resolving interpersonal problems, gaining freedom.
Yeah, by untangling yourself from conflicts and anxieties that aren't actually yours to carry.
But the young man raises a good point, doesn't he? Doesn't this risk making relationships cold, distant?
It's a valid concern. The philosopher uses that story, the Gordian knot.
Alexander the Great.
Yeah. Instead of trying to painstakingly untie this super complex knot representing those tangled relationships, Alexander just cuts it with his sword.
Symbolizing
that sometimes you need a completely different approach to break free from unhealthy patterns. You have to cut the knot, metaphorically speaking, separate the tasks clearly.
The book also talks about how we create ties based on reward and obligation. Like, I did this for you, so now you owe me.
That transactional mindset. It's the opposite of separating tasks. You shouldn't act seeking rewards or feel bound because someone did something for you.
And intervening in someone else's task, like always tying a kid's shoes for them.
It seems easier short term, maybe, but it stops them from learning to tie their own shoes. It prevents growth.
Still, the young man struggles with this. It sounds a bit Coles, maybe, and he brings up this deep need for recognition from others.
Which feels very human, right? Especially if, traditional authorities aren't there. Don't we look to others for validation?
You'd think so. But the philosopher says Adlerian psychology flat out denies the need to seek recognition.
It's a radical stance.
He argues that living just to meet others' expectations means you end up living their life, not yours.
Like a puppet.
Yeah.
Always trying to guess what others want you to be.
And this really gets to the heart of the book's title, doesn't it? The courage to be disliked.
Exactly. True freedom, the philosopher argues, comes from not being afraid of what other people think.
Not being deliberately horrible, obviously.
No, not about being antisocial, but about detaching your self-worth from whether people approve of you or not.
The courage to be happy includes the courage to be disliked by some people.
Yes. And when you let go of that constant need for validation, your relationships can actually become lighter, more genuine, less anxious.
You hold your own interpersonal relationship cards, as the book puts it.
Right.
Yeah.
You decide how you engage, rather than letting others dictate it based on whether they like you or approve. The philosopher even shares a personal story about his own difficult father, and how shifting from blaming the past to focusing on his present goal for how he wanted the relationship to be allowed him to change his approach, regardless of how his father might react.
Okay, so if you're not living for approval, what is the guiding principle? This leads to community feeling, right?
Yes, community feeling or social interest. It's the sense of belonging, seeing others as comrades, finding your place.
Your refuge within the community.
Right. It starts small, you and I, but ideally expands outwards. Though the book warns against getting too fixated on just one small community, like only your work colleagues.
Because if things go wrong there,
you might feel lost. But there's always a larger community you belong to. Humankind, the universe even.
So when things get tough in one relationship or group, the advice is to listen to the voice of the larger community.
Yeah. Don't lose perspective. Don't get trapped in the immediate conflict. See the bigger picture of connection.
But how do you get there? From separating tasks and individual relationships to feeling this broader community connection.
Through horizontal relationships, moving away from vertical, hierarchical ways of relating.
What does that mean, vertical versus horizontal?
Well, the book critiques both praise and rebuke.
Even praise?
Yes, because both come from a vertical mindset. When you praise someone, you're implicitly putting yourself in a superior position, judging their actions.
Oh, interesting. So it creates a hierarchy, not equality.
Exactly. It hinders genuine, equal connection.
So instead of praise,
the book advocates encouragement, which comes from that horizontal place.
How is encouragement different?
It's expressing straightforward gratitude, respect, maybe joy for someone's contribution, but without judgment. Simply saying thank you or That was helpful.
It acknowledges them without putting yourself above them.
Precisely. And true self-worth, the book argues, doesn't come from being praised anyway.
It comes from
feeling useful to others. That feeling of contribution. That's what leads to genuine self-acceptance.
And it doesn't have to be some huge, grand gesture.
Not at all.
Oh.
The philosopher stresses that even just being there, existing, can be a contribution. You don't have to achieve amazing things to have worth.
That's quite profound. Just existing has value. Shifting from what you do to who you are in relation to others.
Yeah. But the young man, again, pushes back. Isn't this just idealistic love thy neighbor stuff? Unrealistic.
How does the philosopher answer that?
With Adler's simple advice, someone has to start.
You have to start it.
You start cultivating community feeling, whether others join in immediately or not. And that involves 3 things. First, self-acceptance.
Really accepting yourself, flaws and all.
Yes. Then second, confidence in others.
Which means?
Choosing to trust people unconditionally, basically. Not demanding proof or collateral before you believe in them. It's an active choice, not naivete. The opposite is doubt, which kills connection.
Okay, self-acceptance, confidence in others. What's the third?
Contribution to others, making yourself useful, contributing to the community in some way.
And these 3 things work together.
Yeah, they form a cycle. Self-acceptance allows you to have confidence in others, which enables you to contribute, which reinforces your feeling of worth and self-acceptance. It leads to that deep community feeling.
So ultimately, the book lands on a definition of happiness that's maybe unexpected.
Very much so. Happiness is the feeling of contribution.
Not getting rich or famous or reaching some endpoint goal.
No, it's the subjective sense right now that I am of use to someone.
Yeah.
That feeling allows you to accept yourself here and now.
And live fully in the present.
Exactly. Instead of regretting the past or worrying endlessly about the future, life becomes like a dance, the book says, a series of moments lived earnestly. The dancing itself is the goal, not getting somewhere specific.
So let go of the life lie, the idea that you need external validation or have to achieve great things.
Right. Shine a light on the here and now. Embrace the courage to be normal. Accept yourself.
And focus on contributing however you can.
That, according to this book, is the path to a meaningful, happy life.
And the meaning of your life isn't some grand thing waiting to be discovered.
No, it emerges gradually as you live each moment, contribute, and connect. It's about choosing freedom and happiness now, using that guiding star of contribution.
Wow. A lot to think about there.
Definitely a perspective shifter.
Thanks for listening to the Book Review Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. See you next time.